All right, the Wednesday morning dance-a-thon. We've got that out of the way. Hey, gang. Um, hey, listen, thanks everybody for joining us here today. We're really looking forward to this, and I'm going to make the ultimate dad joke, this quality conversation that we're about to have. My colleague Paul is on vacation still this week, but he's back for the next episode. So that's I'm sure he's going to bring us travel pictures from his time away. But in the meantime, we have a super awesome guest. We have Hadiya Nuruddin with us here. And Hadiya, you were with us on a previous episode back in the day, and we were talking about storytelling at that time. And not going to lie, I'm not fibbing here. It was one of my favorite episodes. Storytelling is close to my heart, but you've shifted gears since then. So here we're here today to talk about the quality management, processes and systems, etc., around e-learning as a whole. And it occurred to me in thinking about our episode, hey, how did you end up going from a focus on storytelling into quality management? And I mean, so far as to even put the time and effort and energy and all of that into actually writing a book on it. How did you get here?
Well, first of all, I need to compliment you on your light choreography there. I did it too, but it was just footwork. I didn't realize that I didn't realize I should focus on shoulder work.
Fair enough.
All right. Well, thank you for having me. And so in some ways it's a gear shift. In other ways, it's not. In my mind, quality is the story of L&D. It is the story. It is the starting point of where we are, a transformation, and then a resolution, and how that resolution will affect your work going forward. I mean, that's the story model. That's what we do. So that's how I rationalize that change. And I still talk about story all the time. I mean, I don't even think I could have gotten here to the point where I could think about quality the way I think about it without that emphasis on story and narrative and what this means to us and me and you in your work. But the story of how quality jumped into focus, I've always had a challenge with the review process, and I never quite understood why. One day, early on in my freelance career, I was going to some free woman in business or whatever by American Express event. And it was downtown Chicago. And I remember I was crossing, one of my courses was in review. And I had some anxiety over that. And I was crossing the street. And because I was going to this business focused thing, I thought, you know what? Wouldn't it be interesting if someone could start a business where they did all the review and you could just send it to them and they would do it? And so I actually spent some time planning that out. What would that look like? What would it look like if there was just a company where I finished a course at a certain period of time and I send it to you and you just tell me everything that's wrong with it? And I thought that would be interesting, because then we could get people in who are trying to break into the field, people who are new to it, and so they could learn and they could be thinking quality first at all times, and then you can go on to the next project if someone looks at this. Well, after doing some market testing and all of that, writing a lot about it and everything, I realized that it may work, but I don't think it would work for me because I wouldn't even take my own services, because that would mean I would have to be done at a certain period of time. And I'm not going to pretend like I would be, that I would have this window that I could send it off to some company and guarantee that they would send it back to me. Like, I just didn't think that would work. Okay, so I let that go by the wayside. But there was something still about the review and the whole idea of quality that just kept nagging at me. So, of course, I did what a lot of people do. I did the search online for the ultimate review checklist. And there's all these, you could fall on your keyboard and pull up a bunch of review checklists for everything under the sun. And I would do it, and then I would go, that's not right. And I would change it. And then I just end up with this template graveyard. Like, I would never go back to it. And what is wrong? What is the deal here? I wish I was one of those detail oriented people who could get it perfect the first time with no mistakes, but that's just not me. I'm not gonna, there's always gonna be something that I need to go find. So then I started writing some articles about it, but I was very much focused on what a lot of us think about when we think of quality, which is missing commas and broken links and all of those things. So I was very focused on how do you find those things. And so ATD saw one of my things, and they said, okay, articles, and said, hey, do you want to write a book about this? So I was like, sure. And I went into it with, I'm going to write about the perfect checklist. And again, that was my thinking about it. And so I started writing, and I thought, something is not right. Like, something's not right. There's something missing, and I don't know what. So I actually I went to the American Society of Quality, and I went on their website and looked around and said, they have a certification for people who aren't in quality but are quality adjacent, like you're not a quality professional. So I said, let me do some studying for this, and then boom, that's when it all came together for me of why I didn't like the review process, what was missing, why nothing I ever did ever came together. And that was because quality is about a vision. It's not about all these little errors, and it is about a vision for how your team supports the organization, and then putting everything into place to support that vision, to support that mission. It's not about perfection. It is about who you are as a learning and development team, who you are. And again, it's not even about learning styles and what you don't like about. It's not about any of that. It's about, this is how learning will be defined at this organization. And it's something that we should be able to pass off to other groups and expand and contract. And it's a living, breathing thing. And as I go back to looking on the review process of what angered me so about it, is that I say childhood never ends. I've always been accused of being too sensitive, just too sensitive. Just so what? I set you on fire. You don't cry. You're too sensitive. Yes, I was always too sensitive about things. And so that type of thing sort of carries you into adulthood, that you think you're overreacting to everything and you're too sensitive. And so as I begin to back away and look at this and think, why am I taking this personally? I realized that I was never given any guidelines for how anything is supposed to look. There was never a bar. There was never a target. It was just design this course. And so what happened was I could go by only my education, my experience, and my vision of what this should look like. And so when you tell me that you don't like it, it is personal.
Yeah, for sure.
It is personal because you didn't give me any guidelines to say you fell short of this guideline. You didn't say this is what quality looks like, and Hadia, what you produced is not quality. You just said we don't like this. And so of course I'm upset. Of course I'm hurt by that, because this is me. What you see in this course is what I think is quality, and that's important to me. So yeah, I told you I could go on and on about this. Yeah. So that is why I said, I just want people would think that, anyone who spent this much time focused on quality is a perfectionist. But I am not a perfectionist. Side note, I think people who are perfectionists are just control freaks, to be honest. They don't they don't know what perfect is. They think what they're doing is perfect, and they just want you to do it like them, which is
Yeah.
perfect. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
I am not that. There are people who can put their hand on a stack of papers and be like, there's a comma missing on page 5. Like, how did you
Mhm.
do that? Like, some people are perfectionists in that way. That is not what I'm about. I just want people to know what's expected of them, not just the designers. I want the organization to know what to expect from this process. I want the leaders of L&D to be able to articulate what we support, what we are doing to support this organization. And I have, even when I was in charge, never worked in an environment where we talked about it. I'll
Yeah.
stop talking for a minute.
So one, I mean, just even on the level of, as you say, typos and those sorts of things. Prior to this career, which I've been doing for 2 decades now and a little bit, but prior to this career, I actually worked in journalism. So as part of a
Mm,
newsroom, I would bang out my stories and they would go to my editor, who would run a copy edit. And they'd always come back. And I mean, not going to lie, this was a one computer newsroom. Everybody shared, so we were moving things around on floppy disks. He would print it out to read it and then send it back red marked, and then I would make those fixes. And one time, fairly early on anyway in this process, I looked at the red that he's handing me back, and I'm like, oh man, I'm so sorry. And he said, if we knew what mistakes we were making, we wouldn't have made them.
mhm,
And
mhm.
so I felt, it was like, oh, okay. Like, not that he was permitting me to make me, but he was like, nope, this is the process. That's why, we have the checks and balances,
Mhm.
in here. But hey, in even on that simple level, so many of us working in e-learning don't have a copy editor, or someone who
Right.
can perform that role for us. And also, even that stuff can be subjective. You've written something and someone else comes in and says they like or don't like the Oxford comma, for crying out loud. What is the standard that's been established? So
Right.
even on those little levels, there's so much potential for opinion rather than um, defined standards, even just around
And that's what,
what the words are
yeah,
going to be. Yeah.
that's what makes this so challenging. There's many things that make it challenging. Um, I teach a lot of ID courses, and consult with a lot of clients and all that. And I definitely have said often, there's no one way of doing this. There's no one way to do this. But up until recently, I realized I should stop saying that and be clearer, because I was at a conference, and I was sitting next to someone, and she was new to the field, and someone had told her that, right? And so she kept saying, there's no one way, there's no one way. And I was like, actually, no, there is no one way, but there are evidence and research based ways, right? I mean, I don't want, I think I knew that behind the scenes when I would say that. But when you say that to people who don't have that experience, they sort of just run with it. That this is all opinion based. This is all just what you would do based. It's like, no. That's not true. There is some research that supports one strategy or another. I do like to say there's no right or wrong, just consequence. So you have to think about what's the consequence and support that through approaches that have been proven to work. So I agree there's no one absolute way, but there are certain ways that you can follow, and that is consistent with my thoughts around quality, is that you have to. Another reason why the big checklist that you find online, and all my checklists didn't work, is because it didn't support anything specific. It was just sort of a piece of paper flying in the wind. It wasn't attached to a larger vision of what I wanted to accomplish. And so when you take a step back and go, okay, well, I just want to support what everyone thinks quality means, but everyone has different ideas of what that means. For example, is quality that everything is right? Is quality that performance has shifted. That's a quality course. But how are you going to know that before, in the design process? You have to think about, what do we know about our audience? What do we know about instructional design that would support those outcomes that we want? And then we have to put those into place. And then we have to decide how much room our designers have. That's a big fear, I think, around this, is that we practice design more as a art than a science. And it's a science. At the end of the day, it really is. But we all feel like, we do it in a certain way and practice it in a certain way, and that's the right way. But I know that when I worked internal, I used to be half and half. Now I guess I've spent more time outside than inside now.
Okay.
But when I was inside, again, also when I was in charge, I never had a discussion with anyone about design. And even the people in the cubes by me, I don't know what they were doing. I don't know I know they were creating courses, and I knew they were doing e-learning, but we never sat down and had a conversation about it. The closest we got was maybe peer review and their little comments, peer review about what we were doing, but there was never a discussion where we said, should this objective isn't supported in the course, or why did you use this strategy over another? And then when I step back and think about the learner experience for that, so we're just designing a bunch of different courses that look radically different with radically different approaches, and these learners are supposed to just keep figuring it out, which is, I don't think nothing needs to look the same, but you need to sit down and decide what will be consistent. I mean, you're just infringing on cognitive load if every time I take a course and everything is, you got cute with the next button and somewhere then it shouldn't be, right? Those are discussions you should have. Is what is the consequence of us all defining quality for ourselves, and what does that mean? What do we want to do that's different? And then who's going to check, right? So yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot.
For sure. I mean, there are different, I'm not sure that levels, but there are, or maybe it's more like, concentric circles or something like that. But I mean, there are so many different things, that quality ends up encompassing. And even you were talking about, the person next door to you. Well, if two people are given a certain amount of, a topic area or something like, that to prepare, and if one person is doing something that's, fairly informational presentation, and the other person's doing a full-on simulation,
mm-hmm.
Well, not having that quality defined by standards also then ends up affecting, time to build, budget, and
right,
et cetera too. Like it's it has ripples beyond just whether that individual thing is of quality or not.
Right. So what I did was, at the heart of the book is this thing called the quality stack. This is backwards, so you can't see it.
I think the video is going to flip it for you.
Oh, can they flip it? All right.
Yeah.
Flip, yay. Okay, so this is what I call the quality stack, and it does look like a Jenga, not so I can show off my incredible PowerPoint skills, but because I wanted to show how precarious this is. That if something moves, it can all fall apart. So you have to consider how sturdy it's going to be. You have to consider that. Okay. Sorry, my mother's looking at me from the corner. It bothered me. Anyway, so all right. So this is basically the basis of the book and how I talk about quality. I always say start with a mission. Mission is at the top. My editors, of course, said, shouldn't it be at the bottom? I said, no, it's at the top. Because many times we come up with a mission, but we haven't supported it. And so this mission is just floating out there. You had your offsite with your muffins and your coffee, and you all decided that, oh, okay, we have a mission. This is who we are. And then there was nothing in place to support it. And then that just stayed in the other room with the coffee and the muffins and really didn't do anything for us. So first is, what does this look like? And the biggest issue is deciding what quality looks like. And are you going to go for that performance-based approach of, it's performance. That's what it looks like. But then you have to go back around and say, what makes a performance-based process? So the example that I always use is, we are going to, for us, a quality course is a course that closely emulates what people will be doing on the job, right? So it's not a theory-based course. It is a course that ensures transfer, supports transfer, so that people can feel like, oh, whatever whatever I'm going to do on the job, I'm going to do in this course, or come close to it. That's a quality course for us. A course that is just, that means, you have to really talk about, what does that mean? That means that courses where it's just slide after slide, where there's no practice, that's supporting objectives, is not a quality course. I don't care how colorful it is, and there's no typos, and we have decided as a group that is not a quality course. Okay. So that's a beautiful thing. I'm so glad that you all decided that. But that's going to take some effort to figure that out, because we know that sometimes asking our subject matter experts, what do you want them to do with this information? It's the world's hardest SAT question. They just look at you like, they just need to know it. Okay, we'll just email them. We gather them all up. We can tell them. No, well, then there's something they need to do. So getting that is hard. And sometimes asking the right questions, sometimes the designer is intimidated, sometimes there's stuff. But this is the trick. The more levels you have, the harder it is to support. The more complete it would be, the more effective it will be, but it will be harder to support. So there are some teams who we've never even had this conversation. So if we just have this conversation, we've all been here for a bajillion years. We all have a consistent design experience. We collaborate. Maybe we just need the mission. Fine. Stop there. Fine. But it's going to be floating in the air like that, because there could be a reorg, there could be a change. You could have consultants come on, you can hire new people, and they will be like, I don't know what you mean by problem-based, because where I worked, we defined it differently. How are you defining that? Oh, okay. Now you need the next step. You need to start talking about scope. That's what quality planning is. Like you said, there's so many things. You may decide, actually, before we just throw out problem-based, we need to really figure out under what circumstances and what scope does that mean? Does that mean that all of our e-learning courses? Does that mean all of our instructor-led? Does that mean this line of business only? Does that mean everyone in the organization? What does that mean? Does that mean just courses we put together, or does that mean just vendor? What does it mean? So scope begins to shape it a little bit more beyond just mission. And it's like, okay, so what you mean is that all the courses that we produce, whether they're instructor-led or e-learning course, have to be centered on some sort of problem. Like, it has to be centered on that. Yeah, that's what we mean. So you need to get that information from people. So that'll be great. Go ahead and do that. Okay. How? How am I going to do that? Because I know storyline, but I don't. What do you mean branching? Like, what's happening here? Like, what? Because we just did really straight courses. We built courses out the LMS in my last job. So I don't know what you mean by that. Oh, okay. So now it gets to guidelines, right? Now we need more guidelines to support what we've done up here. Like I said, you may not, but once you start inviting these other people to the party and they don't know what dish to bring, you need to start making it clear as to what you want to do. So say, for example, so quality assurance. So since we're going to have these problem-based courses, and this is the goal we want to have, so some of our guidelines have to be, you have to, from the very beginning, you're going to have to find out from your subject matter experts from the very first meeting what problem they want to solve. That is the guideline. That needs to happen, because if you don't do it then you're in trouble. You're even trying to write the design document. Can't do it later. You have to do it then. You may think, of course, we'll do it again. Many people don't. Many people don't do it at that point. So do it then. So that's our guideline. There's other guidelines around accessibility. There's guidelines around, but one of our guidelines is because we have it broken up in phases in this fictional company I'm talking about. We have it broken up in phases, and one is that beginning phase. And in that, one of the guidelines is during the first meeting, you need to find that out. The first meeting. Don't leave the room until you know what problem they are trying to solve. So lock the doors. Don't let them out. All right, so that's that. Okay, that's fine. That's a guideline. Okay, so how do I ask them that? I mean, so, or maybe they won't say that to you. What will happen is it just won't happen. It just won't happen. That discussion won't be had. And you are trying to figure out, why aren't people having this discussion? This is where quality control comes in, right? So quality control, people use assurance and control. No, they're really literal terms. Assurance are things that you put into place that assures quality, meaning that it supports the vision. You can't control quality after it's done. Like you've created the course. You can't control quality at that point. So you're going to have to do it sooner. And so you have to do it during production. So whatever guidelines you have in place all of them are probably going to be pretty challenging to really live out. And so that is where quality control's in. So if I suspect that this guideline is not being followed, then I have to put some policies and procedures in place to help them meet that guideline. So we're going to create some templates, some interview templates. You may not need it for the rest of your career, but I need you to go in with that template that will ask these questions. What problems are you trying to solve? What does it look like? What does failure look like? Why are you doing this now? All of those classic questions of probing, of what's stopping people from doing this now? All of those questions that we are using to probe and try to find out what's going on, So that is quality control. You're trying to control quality so that people are getting close to remember what that mission is, which is a problem-based course. So that's how that little template is supporting the larger mission. All right, so that's control. And then you have quality review. Now, there's a part of me that feels like just telling people what is expected of them will go a long way. It's almost like, how dare you stick a checklist in my face after it's over? Like you should have did this in the beginning. Like you should have given me the checklist before I started creating the course, before any of this other stuff happened. So I almost kind of want to say that it's not the most essential part, because you have those guidelines and you ensure they can hit those guidelines. However, there are other things that need to be checked. People say in the classes that I teach on this, so is that going to stop all the looking for commas? No. Commas will still be commas. They are still disrespectful, and they will still hide and evaporate, is what I think they're doing.
It's like a sock from a pear in the dryer, right? It just goes somewhere. And
actually, what research says is that there's a reason why you can't find your own errors, and that not only are you tired of looking at this class that you've spent all weeks looking at, but when you're reading it, you're not looking for meaning anymore. When someone else looks at it, they're trying to find meaning. And that's why they see the errors, but yet they think I'm so good. No, it's because you're looking for meaning, and I'm not looking for meaning anymore because I wrote it, right? So that's a classic reason. Again, there are some people who still just nail it, just like we're able to do it perfectly, and bless their hearts. I'm not one of those people. So there is that, that disconnect between the fact that why you can find other people's errors and you can't find your own. But how detailed scope is your friend for something like this. if you march in and say we're going to do the whole company, I wouldn't. I would have a vision for everyone you support for the whole organization, and then you would scale it all the way back down. Because what you don't want to just say we're going to do the retail line of business and see what happens. No, I think you should plan out for the whole organization and then say we're going to start with retail and this is what we're going to look for so that we can be prepared to scale this to corporate and then scale it to manufacturing and all of that. But that should be part of the full plan, because if not, you're going to create things for retail that are so specific that you won't be able to apply them to these other areas. So be thinking of the larger vision first, and then scale back and get ready to explode. I do tell people, don't create a solution in search of a problem, because this will be deprioritized. I mean, at the end of the year, you'll be like, it's quiet. We can do it now. And you're going to do it now. And you're going to get, I don't know, maybe about here, right? Maybe right around there. And then boom, next year we're doing this next year. And it's just going to keep being deprioritized. So be prepared for that. Have your why you're doing this. I do think the best way to do it, if you have time, is to look in your own organization and try to find it. Because people who say we don't need this, you know what? If you have the data and you say you don't need it, I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with people who don't know. They're just saying it. They don't really know what is happening. They don't really know the consequences for what they are turning out. So, I think the best way to do it is to dig deeper at your organization. I do not suggest you go through every course and try to find what's going on, but maybe you have to start from now. Maybe you have to change the questions on your evaluation with a vision in mind of what you're trying to get from those learners. Maybe you have focus groups, maybe you have control groups, but you need something to sustain this project. You need something to kind of go, remember when we did the research and found that, our attrition is so low because of XYZ. We're doing this to solve that problem. Because if you're just doing it because you read about it, this fabulous, wonderful book about it, and you're like, and the cover was purple and I liked it. If you're just doing that, or you heard this amazing woman speak about it on a conference or on LinkedIn, that's not going to take you far. It should, but it's not. It's not going to take you far. You're going to have that vision of how you're going to support the organization.
Yeah. I mean, some of it, motivation for this kind of a change. You just mentioned like the word attrition. What does your own data say about what do you have right now that can measure success of your projects? Maybe that's only completion rates. Okay. Does that signify a problem? And if so, is that a starting point? Do you have information? So many organizations, don't, but do you have information or some understanding of whether this is actually making a difference back on the job? That level of feedback loop too. And then so that's maybe coming from your current content process and looking at effectiveness as a way of maybe surfacing, the need for this kind of a structure. But there's also are there larger organizational, the word is escaping me, but mission, I guess, mission and values stuff, right? Like, is the stuff that we're doing actually aligned with the mission and values, statements? And maybe that's because maybe you're looking at it and you're saying, well, yeah, we have a great, we have a high attrition rate. Does that really, well, no, we're not living up to that, or we're not meeting that expectation that the organization has.
And a lot of those courses are required too.
Yeah.
Right. So they just sort of have to do it year after year.
Yep. So it ties in, both directions, I guess is what I'm thinking. Like, it's not just quality for the sake of quality in a product. It's quality as in meeting the organization's objectives.
Yeah.
Reducing risk,
Hmm.
increasing, profitability, streamlining, effectiveness, or whatever, all of those things that the organization, knows are that hit the bottom line. It's not ever about completions, right? It's about
Yeah. I think another approach you can take too is, I do still go back to that sort of research-based idea. One of my favorites is Merrill's first principles of instruction, because what he did was he looked at all of these theories and said, what do they have in common? What are the five things that they say support learning? And so, and one of those, and it says, right, keep going back to problem based. One of those is problem based and all of that. So, what you could decide too, if you don't have that data and it's not reliable, it's not consistent, what you can do is say, what philosophies do we want our training to support? And then you could just look at your courses and say, how many of these are following the first principles of instruction? How many of these are other theories that are out there, social learning or something like that? You could all decide that we know that this research out there supports learning. We know that. And we know we want to see how close our courses come to that, meet that ideal, actually sort of support those theories. So that's one way you could do it. And then from that point, you start collecting the data and then you can start moving from there. Because, like I said, where I worked in the past, there just really wasn't much data being collected. So if I was, in 2005 sitting here, I wouldn't even know. I would be just thinking about commas and extra spaces that articulate presenter used to put. I didn't do that. Extra spaces that articulate presenter used to put in all their
autocorrect in
courses.
general doing
I
things
know,
for us, right?
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah.
So I'm framed. Um, and so I wouldn't know where to start. I would just be assuming that people are making mistakes somewhere and could do better. But that's not going to sustain this project. It isn't. You're really going to have to look and see where are we. And it's not by anybody's fault. I think another thing I put in there too is don't assume people don't want quality. Like, no one, people, they don't want quality. They don't want, that's not, assume everyone does. Assume that for the best. The question is, are they willing to make the sacrifices and take the time needed to support that mission?
Yeah.
That's the real question.
The management, the leadership of a division that's looking to the L&D team for something, let's call it courses or whatever. They're not interested in completion. They're interested
Mm-hmm.
in, hey, are people able to do the job we need them, to do? And so therefore they are interested in quality,
Mm-hmm.
and then
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's about us talking to them in those perspectives.
It often
Having that
doesn't feel
conversation
like
outwards.
it though. It doesn't feel, I always say the person who compromised quality was not the instructional designer who, again, missed the comma. It's the design manager, the L&D lead, who decided that 2 weeks was long enough to build a course. It's the L&D lead who didn't give any guidelines. It's the L&D lead who isn't making sure that the guidelines they did put in place aren't supported by some kind of policy. Take closed captioning. So, manager goes to a conference and says, they said we need closed captioning in all of our courses. Let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so are you going to allow them to add that to the timeline? And who's going to make sure not only just the work of closed captioning, do they know how to add closed captioning? And who's going to check that? Are you going to add that to the review process? That's quality control right there. Are you willing to put those in place, or are you just going to make sweeping announcements about what you should be doing and not doing? I had a manager once who would do that. She would go on a trip and she would just be sending all these threats from airplanes. Like, well, you didn't say this to us earlier. I don't understand. And so, but there's no change in the vision. Like, there's no change overall. Again, it's just another guideline that's sort of just flying in the wind there, not connected to something larger other than the fact that you heard about it. And so now you have to step back and say, this is a guideline I want to add. There should be a process for that. I also want to mention that this whole, oh, everyone has their own view of policy, so everyone's quality, so everyone's going to have their individual stack. No, your team needs to have the stack. Everyone has to have a similar looking stack. You have to all be pulling from the same Jenga. Like, that's how that should work. And there should be someone watching that. There should be. I always say there's a process owner and a process lead. Process owner is the person in charge of L&D. I know that some will resist that. I can think of a litany of managers I've had who would be like, no, Hadi, I think this would be a good stretch scope for you. No, you are the owner, because the owner has to defend it. The owner has to, when some other team comes in and says, training takes too long, we need this, that, and the other, the process owner has to say, this is what we do. This is what we do. And no wonder they think that what we do is witchcraft and made up, because we all have different policies. We all have different procedures. If you work with me, it's one way. If you work with Dara, it's another way. What? No. The owner has to say, this is our way of doing it. But the process lead should be a fellow designer who can help support people as they struggle to meet the guidelines. So, I say things exception themselves out of existence. At first, it will be, oh, I tried to follow your fancy. The word fancy has been weaponized. I love that. We tried to follow your fancy process, Nadia, but Steve was really honest about this deadline, and that. Okay, well, the process lead needs to come in and say, okay, do we need an abbreviated version of the quality procedure? I'm not going to let you just get away with being like Steve said. No, I need you to find a way for the other Steves that are coming in the pipeline, or else you're going to keep coming up with reasons not to do this. Better yet, let me talk to Steve. Yeah, there has to be that person who's like, because this also protects the people in the system. It protects the people working on this as well. These processes and guidelines, that you can do your job and you are guarded by this fortress of quality.
I mean, that's the reality for every other department or every other group. Yeah. They have processes so that things don't fall through, the cracks, etc. Why should L&D be any different from that perspective?
That's right.
Hadia, this has been a great chat. I'm going to make sure that we get a link to your book tossed into the chat in the session overall, gang. There it is. The book is titled Quality Management in Learning and Development. It's purple. If you haven't been listening, gang, it's purple. Look for the purple one.
Look for the purple.
Hadia, congratulations first off on the book. And as always, hey, what a fabulous conversation. It's been a delight to have you with us here. Are you showing up at any conferences where folks can connect with you in the near term?
Oh yeah, always a conference. I run a conference in Chicago called the Chicago E-Learning Technology Showcase. That is a live event in Chicago, just outside Chicago, on August 19th. I'm also doing a e-learning design pre-con for TechLearn.
Okay.
And in September, I'm actually doing the keynote for the ATD St. Louis conference.
Right on.
And then what else? There's DevLearn. I'm doing a pre-con for that, and I'm also doing a session. I'm doing the pre-con is going to be on actually creating interactive stories through e-learning.
Nice.
Instead of just sort of in theory, we're going to actually do it.
Going to actually do it.
Yeah, actually do it. Isn't that crazy? And then my session is going to be about quality.
Awesome.
So, yeah.
So there's lots of opportunities for folks to come and hear more and connect with you on those fronts. That's awesome. Again, thanks so much for joining us here. Folks, don't forget, Instructional Designers in Offices Drinking Coffee. We come to you every second Wednesday live. And you don't have to drink coffee, by the way. It's just a phrase, gang. But we're brought to you by the friendly folks here at Domino Learning Systems. Check us out. Maybe there are things that we can do that can help you not just with your content creation, but your content management and your quality processes internally. The website, dominknow.com, if you've never seen it written out before. We invite you to check us out and reach out to us if you have anything that further that you might want to learn about. It's time now, gang, to dance on out of here. Hope everyone has a great Wednesday, the rest of their Wednesday, and we look forward to connecting with everybody again in 2 weeks' time.